Welcome everybody to the Right Relationship session. My name is Aleya Dao and this is my husband, Doug Noll. We will tonight be sharing with you some tools on how to get your needs met, increase respect in relationship, and also how to surf the emotions, how to manage your own emotions, and also how to manage the emotions of somebody that you are interacting with. And my husband wouldn't say manage, but more be present with your emotions. And then how to hold an awareness and a presence and be in a healthy way of dealing with emotions that can be pretty intense, especially in an intimate relationship. All of the skills and the tools and the techniques that we'll be sharing with you tonight in the session, you can actually use in any relationship that you're in. We're right now angling it more to the intimate relationship because that can get very complicated and very complex. So here we go.
So, do we want to start with emotions?
I think so.
Okay. So, as I am always fond of telling everybody, we are 98% emotional and 2% rational, which means that every part of our experience as human beings is largely emotional, not a whole lot of rationality going on. And what's really interesting is that our whole educational system, from the time we start preschool until we get our PhDs, is designed to develop the rational side of the brain, and we really don't spend a lot of time understanding the emotional experience that we all live through. And parents don't do a particularly good job of teaching their children about how to manage emotional experience because the parents don't know how to manage emotional experience. So it gets pretty complicated when we get into relationships because if I have an emotional experience, either positive or negative, and I'm working with Aleya, she's going to cycle off my emotions, and pretty soon if we're being negative, if we're having negative emotional experiences, we can get into what I call a conflict feedback loop. So that as I have an experience of anger and fear, for example, I might become reactive to that, impulsively reactive. We'll come back and talk about that in just a second. And then Aleya will pick up on my anger and fear. She might even interpret it as being angry and fearful towards her. That might create an emotional experience in her, which causes her to be impulsively reactive. And all of a sudden we're bouncing off each other emotionally, and our conflict escalates. And that is a really difficult problem to deal with in relationships. So the secret to all of this, the tool to all of this, is to be, first of all, to understand that we have these emotional experiences. It's part of what it means to be human. It happens to us every day. It varies in intensity and duration. But we just accept the fact that what it means to be human is to be emotional. And it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it just is. We don't try to suppress emotions. We don't try to not have emotions. We don't try to put a good spin on bad emotions because we're denying our essence when we do that. So the first step then is to understand the emotional experience that we're having in the moment. And here's something that might be very useful to you. If you took a look at a scanning image of a brain going through emotional experience using a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine, you would see a tiny little sparkles of light in the brain starting to light up, and then you would see literally a cascading effect as neurons begin to fire throughout the brain. You'd see this cascading effect, and the light part of the brain lighting up gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it's completely dominating the emotional centers of the brain. And it'll persist there for a while, really not very long, and then it'll start to inhibit and the light will start to contract. And if you were to look at it sideways as a waveform, what you would see is if you were looking at the side of a wave, you would see it's starting small, and then it builds up to a crest, and then it peaks, and then it starts to come back down again. And that's the nature of our emotional experience. Especially if we're having intense emotions. It's very, very difficult to have an emotional experience of significant intensity that's going to last more than 5 or 10 minutes. Because the metabolic load on the brain is so intense, we basically just run out of carbohydrates and we can no longer function. So there's a self-regulating mechanism that we have biologically.
So what you're essentially saying is that when we get this huge emotional charge, if we can just hang in there, it will then pass and we don't react to it in that moment. And can you put this on?
Yeah, that is ultimately the secret. Is that, one, we have to become aware of the emotional experience we're having. Ideally, we can label what the emotional experience is. That's not always easy to do. And then we sit and just let it roll through us. Now that's hard because the emotional experience is designed to motivate us to action. So for example, you might get into a situation where you feel really anxious about something, and when I get anxious, I feel itchy. I feel like ants are crawling all over me, and I just want to get moving and do something. And that's what anxiety is all about. But oftentimes that kind of reaction is inappropriate, and so what I need to do, and what I have to learn to do, is sit and tolerate the discomfort until it fades. And if I can do that for anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes, the emotion will actually go away. And then I can sit back and decide how I'm going to respond to it. So where we get into trouble in relationships is, instead of letting this emotion pass, acknowledging that we're having an emotional experience, being with the emotion, being present with it, letting it pass through us, knowing it's going to pass eventually, what happens is we impulsively react to it because the emotion is calling out for physical action. So depending upon the nature of the emotion, if it's negative, we might shout, we might yell, we might scream, we might throw things, we might slam doors, we might be insulting or disrespectful. It's an impulsive reactivity to this physical experience that we're having that starts to cause damage to relationships.
Definitely. And then that actually, can I segue into that whole surfing the emotions? Mm-hmm. So when we are surfing our emotions, when we're surfing our emotions, I actually talk about how to literally use your emotion to move you to a higher vibration. So if you're experiencing anxiety or anger, frustration, irritation, if you actually look at it more as fuel, literally this vibration moving through you, and if you let it move through you, it actually can move you up to a higher frequency if you allow it, without the judgment. The moment we go into judgment around it, the moment we try to control it or change it, we then stop surfing the emotion, which means we then stop the fuel of having it take us to a higher frequency of where our soul is truly intending. So some part of us, I speak a lot about taking responsibility for all of the situations that we might create for ourselves. So if I have a partner who's being disrespectful, some part of me has actually asked him to disrespect me. I'm going to have the emotional charge around him being disrespectful towards me as a mechanism for me to start shifting, changing, and evolving in a different way, i.e. me respecting myself instead of asking Doug to respect me. So the next time you have a huge emotion of frustration or anger, irritation or grief or sadness, I invite you to think about it more as literally a wave of energy moving through you, no judgment on it, and let that fuel move you up to a higher frequency.
So should we talk about the car incident?
I think we should.
Okay.
And my phone's not working, so what I'm going to do is we're going to use this.
Okay. So, a week ago today, we were getting ready to take a flight. And so we have our little airplane in a hangar, and we got the airplane out, and it was pre-flighted and ready to go, and we had to back my brand new 2013 Subaru Outback. First new car I've had in 12 years. Not even 1,000 miles on the car. Everybody got the picture? And Aleya says, well, I'll back the car in. So tell us what happened, dear.
So I backed the car in, and I forgot that there was a huge steel post that's in the hangar, and I heard a crunch. So I stopped, I pulled forward, I got out, I took a look at the damage. It was a scratch and a dent. And I knew that Doug was going to get upset. Now, I didn't project how upset I thought he would be, but I decided that, you know what, in that decision, in that moment when I backed the car up, I just thought, okay, you know what, I just did something that I wish I hadn't done. And I got upset with myself for about 5 minutes. And Doug was upset about the situation. He made it very clear that he wasn't upset at me around the situation, which is very unusual. Can we just unpack that one?
Sure.
So, like, what did you do inside yourself and all of the self-awareness so that people can have some tools to not make that situation literally a divorce?
Well, the first thing I did was, as soon as I heard the crunch, and I knew the car had got a pretty good ding in it, I felt anger. All of a sudden I started having these big emotional experiences. And I immediately started labeling to myself what I was feeling. So I was feeling anger, I was feeling anxiety, I was feeling like there was a boundary violation, I felt abandoned, and I felt a lot of grief and loss, because this was the first new car that I'd had in 12 years. I don't buy cars very often. And, I'd paid a lot of money for it, put a lot of money down, and it was a car I intended to have for a long time, and I wanted to keep it going. And
But in the emotions.
Well, right. So these are all the stuff that was coming up for me. And then I realized that I'm going to have to get the thing fixed. It's probably going to cost a couple of $1,000 to get the dent fixed, because nothing is easy on new cars. And it was going to take a week, and I was going to have to get a rental car, and it was just going to be a real pain on top of a plate full of stuff I've already got going on. And so I just got really frustrated. And so then, as I experienced these emotions, and then I was able to label them to myself, I was able to recognize, this is not this is not about Aleya, this is about a car, this is about dinging a car. And I was able to start putting it into perspective. And so I was very clear to her, I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at the situation. And I allowed myself to just be with the anger and the frustration and the anxiety and the abandonment and all the grief, because I had to let it pass through me.
And that's the key.
You're right.
That's
I couldn't suppress it, and if I yelled at Aleya and blamed her, that wouldn't have allowed the emotion to flow through. She would have gotten upset.
Well, I would have then energetically, because we do speak a bit about the energetics, I would have then taken responsibility for fixing his emotions. I would have then tried to fix his emotions. I would have then empathically felt all of his anger and all of his upset. And after about 5 or 10 minutes, I made a very conscious choice to move into a space in my heart to let Doug do whatever he needed to be as upset as he needed to be without me taking responsibility for his reaction. And that was the key component, where we did not fuse our energies and take responsibility for each other's emotions. And that's a key piece when you're surfing the emotions. You take responsibility for your own emotions and let your partner be in whatever emotions they need to be in. So as we were flying back to Santa Barbara, sitting side by side, an inch away from each other, I just moved into my heart and said, you know what, he can be as upset as he needs to be. He's using that upset for his growth and his evolution. And I did all of this silently. And within about 20 minutes, an hour, the emotional upset had really shifted, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, it didn't take long for me to get over it. I mean, by the time we were up in the air and we were flying, the wave had passed, and I was just kind of processing okay, what do I got to do with this thing? When am I going to find time to get it and get it fixed? So now it was a problem to be solved, not an emotion to be negotiated. And so I think the reason that we like this story, even though it just happened a week ago, by the way, take the car in tomorrow morning and have it fixed. Even though this just happened a week ago, it is a great example, because if you're not coming from a place of understanding how emotions work in intimate relationships, you can just imagine how a couple might respond to this. And in fact, as I called around to figure out what to do with this thing and told the story, people would say, "Uh-oh, what happened?" They were all expecting a huge blow up, and I said, it's all good. It all works.
And I want to actually speak to another layer here, that when we have a situation or an event that happens in a relationship, whether it's an intimate relationship or with another, we always want to take a look and see if there's something else that is actually trying to be processed on that situation or that event. So if I, on a regular basis, somehow disrespects Doug regularly, and then I bash his car, Doug isn't just going to process me bashing his car. He's going to start processing all of the moments I have ever been disrespectful to him, all of the moments that I may not have listened to him, unbeknownst to me. And I might say to him, "Why are you so upset about this car?" And it's because at an emotional and energetic level, he is trying to process through all of the moments that I was not enough, or whatever it was, whatever he perceives. And that is not what gets spoken when we get into these situations. And that is where it gets incredibly confusing, because we'll have a reaction that comes from our partner, and it's out of timing, and it's out of context. So it's the mountain out of a molehill. And at an energetic level, our energy fields will actually perceive that as a psychic attack, and our partner might be completely and totally not aware that that's what's happening. So it can be pretty complicated, but I invite you to start looking at the upset around a situation and ask yourself, what are all of the energies that are being processed on this situation? Is it just the situation, or is it everything that led up to the situation?
So this other skills that you can develop to help you with this is to, first of all, try to recognize the next time that you have an emotional experience. And it doesn't matter. It could be some person cutting you off on the freeway. It could be somebody making you mad. It doesn't matter what it is. We have them all the time, and start becoming aware of it. And as soon as you can become aware of it, start feeling your physical body. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Is your skin getting flushed? Are you blushing? Do you feel your heart rate increasing? Are you sweating a little bit? Hands getting clammy? What is the physical feeling that you're having with that emotional experience? And just track that. Track your physical feeling, because so much of what we feel emotionally is really a physical sensation that occurs in our body. And it's much easier for us to become aware of how we're physically feeling in the moment than it is to try to label this very complex set of emotional experiences that are generated in the neurons of the emotional centers of our brain. So start with the physical stuff, and practice that. And just use everyday experiences to start just becoming aware. So when I'm driving and I hit a red light and I'm in a hurry because I'm late to a meeting, I recognize, well, I'm anxious because I'm late, and so I just label that feeling, and I label what's going on with me physically, and I want to shout and yell and scream, and maybe I do, but at least I'm recognizing that I'm having an emotional experience. So that's the first and most important step. You cannot have emotional intimacy in a relationship until you master your own emotional experience.
At least being aware of your emotions.
That's the begin. You at least have to become aware that you're having an emotional experience. Where people get into trouble in intimate relationships is when they are unconscious about their emotional experience, and they just have these impulsive reactions to whatever is coming up, and they really don't know what's going on. And as Aleya and I sift through what makes our relationship work, a big part of it is that we have emotional experiences like everybody else. It's just that we have disciplined ourselves to manage our emotional experiences in a positive, present way. And that makes a huge difference in how we treat each other and how we are able to respond when each of us gets upset. And so that's the first big step.
And then the second step that is really helpful is to realize that you're actually choosing your emotion. Some part of you is choosing to go into the frustration, the anger. And then the third one, which is very, very subtle, is if some part of you is choosing this emotion, creating the situation that triggers that vibration, that emotion, then you ask yourself the question, what is it that I am trying to learn from this emotional response? So if Doug says something and I react to whatever he says from a place of anger or not being heard, not being respected, whatever it is, the very first step, what am I feeling right now because of what he just said, not blaming him. And then the second piece is to realize that I am choosing this emotional reaction. And then the third piece is to ask myself, if I am feeling disrespected, where do I actually need to respect myself to a greater degree? If I'm perceiving that he is betraying me, where am I actually betraying myself? Because we will actually magnetically draw to us that which we are carrying within us. So the more self-aware we become and the more we realize that we go into these very negative vibrations, there's always a solution, there's always a positive. And so I invite you to start asking yourself the question, what is the opposite of the emotion that you are constantly challenged by in your relationship? What's the solution of that emotion? And realize that some part of your soul is determined to master that. And so if you start then meeting your own need of respecting yourself or committing to yourself more deeply instead of asking your partner to do it, you actually are then walking the path of a more enlightened being.
So let's assume that we have started working on the process of becoming more aware of our emotional experiences. And by the way, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. This is something that's going to take a couple of months of really intense practice, and it's really a lifelong endeavor. It's not something that you're going to be able to just listen to a webinar by Doug and Aleya and all of a sudden be able to do this.
Once and you've got it,
That's right. It takes practice. And this is a theme that we will be constantly coming back to on these webinars because this is so fundamental to happiness. Okay, but let's assume that you're working towards mastery and you've committed towards becoming more aware and more emotionally present. What do you do when you're with a partner or anybody who's having an emotional experience and that emotional experience is starting to trigger you? How do you respond to somebody who's having an emotional experience and they're unconscious and they're being impulsively reactive? And in the worst case, they're yelling and shouting at you, and maybe really coming at you, attacking you, insulting you, disrespecting you. And we have developed over the years a really cool little tool for that. Do you want to describe it?
Oh yeah, the Buddha bubble.
The Buddha bubble.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have to get two people. Both people need to agree to this exercise. Although actually, not.
That's right.
Cancel that.
Yeah, you can put yourself into a Buddha bubble.
And the other person doesn't need to know what a Buddha bubble is. So my sense is that you might want to explain what a Buddha bubble is.
Okay. So again, we teach from what we learn, and we were having some issues. I don't even remember what they were all about, but it was pretty intense. And we came across the idea that one person had to listen without reactivity. They had to be non-reactive. One of us had to be whoever of us was listening had to be non-reactive, non-judgmental, and non-critical. We couldn't fix the person. We couldn't do any kind of active listening or empathic listening or affect labeling or any other stuff that we teach and use in our relationship and we use in our work. What we decided was that you just had to be present with the other person. And in order to do that, we said, well, why don't we go into create the Buddha bubble? So if you could imagine being a Buddha and being this enlightened being that nothing is going to trouble you. No matter what the other person says, you're going to be in a place where you have this bubble of protection around you, emotional protection, such that no matter what another person says or does to you, I mean other than maybe physically attack you, you are sheathed in this bubble of protection. Now, it doesn't mean that the bubble is insulating you from either your own emotions or from the emotions of the other person, but what it means is that you're in a place of non-reactivity, non-judgment, and non-criticism. And we call that going into the Buddha bubble. And what happens, what we've learned, is that when I go into the Buddha bubble, and Aleya has to really talk about something difficult, I can sit there and I will actually start to feel myself have an emotional reaction to what she's saying. And I say, well, I'm in the Buddha bubble. I don't need to have that reaction. And I take a deep breath, and the reaction goes away. And then she'll say something else, and I'll feel anxious or frightened or whatever, and I'll feel it and say, well, I'm in the Buddha bubble. I can just sit here and be present in the moment, and I don't have to have an emotional reaction to whatever it is that she is saying. It's most important for me just to be present, to be non-judgmental, non-critical, non-reactive to whatever it is she says, and just wait. And let the emotion pass through her, let her do whatever she has to do, and just hold a kind, loving, compassionate presence for her without having to do anything. Very, very simple to talk about. Actually, it's pretty simple to do, but you have to, again, be aware when your emotions come up, they're going to get triggered, and you have to just let them go and realize that you are protected because you are in this Buddha bubble. It's amazing how it works.
And the other piece is that when there is the agreement that I'm going to be venting and be upset and Doug is in the Buddha bubble, that I have to agree to not blame him for any of my emotions. So that is a key component when you are in relationship with somebody. You can't control another person's behavior. And if you are in a relationship and your partner has declined coming in and doing this televideo session, that means that there might not be a safe space for you to share these tools. But you actually get to choose when you get upset to no longer blame your partner for the emotions that you're having. So if I'm upset and I ask Doug to be in the Buddha bubble, what I will then say is, I am choosing to be really upset right now. I'm feeling betrayed. I don't feel like you listen to me. I don't feel like you respect me. But I am choosing that. That's how I am perceiving it. So I'm taking full responsibility for those emotions instead of putting it all on him and asking him to change his behavior. I'm looking at where do I need to change my behavior, but still allowing those emotions to process through.
So it's really helpful if you have a partner who cooperates with you like Aleya and I cooperate with each other. But most people don't have that gift, I guess. I mean, most
they haven't developed it.
Well, that's right. But I'm saying, so we're starting from a beginning place. So somebody in the relationship has to start somewhere. So it's really, if you're listening to this, it's probably your obligation. We're going to be talking about your needs here in a minute, but it's your obligation probably to set the example and put yourself into a Buddha bubble. Now, you have to be very, very careful that you don't insulate yourself emotionally, that you don't detach, that you don't become emotionally unavailable, that you're putting up a concrete wall between you and your partner. That's not what a Buddha bubble is. It's the love of Buddha in a little protective bubble so that you're not taking the emotional hits. That's all it is. And
you let them be in their emotion.
And you let them be in their emotion, and you be present with them. There is some great stuff on how to work with kids when they're having meltdowns. And basically it's the Buddha bubble technique, where if a 2-year-old's having a meltdown, what you have to do is allow that kid to have a meltdown. You stay within touching distance of the child. You let them have the meltdown. You don't react. You be present for them in every moment. And believe it or not, that meltdown will go down faster than if you try to grab the kid, swat them, yell at them, or do whatever you have to do, what people do to their kids in the supermarket when they're having a meltdown. It's the same idea. Somehow, the person who's being emotional recognizes at some level that there's another human being there who's being present for them. And that has this effect of inhibiting the emotional centers of the brain in ways that we still don't understand. It's really quite miraculous.
And it's totally silent. You don't have to say a word.
In fact, you don't want to say a word. No fixing, no justifying, no rationalizing, no arguing, no trying to help, no nothing. Silence is critical here. And that's hard. It's hard because we want to take action. We want to do something. We want to fix it.
But the action that you can take is holding that really safe and sacred space for this person that you do love. You love their essence, but you might not love their behavior. And you are simply holding a safe and sacred space for their essence in the moment when they have forgotten themselves, when they are in a behavior that is less than enlightened. And there's a really great sort of tool that I use with myself. And I ask myself, if Doug were an ascended master, would he be upset that I just backed his car into a pole?
Probably so.
No, he wouldn't be. He wouldn't be upset. And so whatever emotion he needs to be in, because I just backed his brand new car into a pole, is his mechanism that he is using for his own growth and evolution, and I really shouldn't and can't take that away from him. So by moving into that space in my heart of just holding a safe and loving space for him to use whatever emotions he needs to use is incredibly powerful, and I stay energetically and empathically clean and clear. The other sort of challenging and confusing thing in relationships is that we will empathically feel our partner's feelings. If Doug is upset, I will feel that upset, and I will sometimes interpret his upset as my own, where in truth, I'm just empathically feeling him. And I have this whole thing around empathic sensitivity. If I am feeling Doug's emotions, if I'm feeling anybody's emotions, if you're feeling anybody's emotions, it is the indicator that some part of you has energetic information for them. Instead of taking responsibility for shifting, changing, or transforming that person's emotions, I invite you more to send the energetic information to them. And I call that your higher self to their higher self. And as you allow your higher self or your energetic self to send appropriate information to them, you don't have to know what that information is, as well as release responsibility for shifting and changing and transforming that emotion of the partner, the empathic sensitivity starts to release. And so I no longer then feel the upset of that individual. You will shift your own emotion, and you'll actually come back into your own balance and your own alignment.
So there's a neuroscientific basis for all that too, which is pieces of our brain called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are what give us the ability to have empathy with people at the physiological level, because what a mirror neuron does is basically emulate or simulate what we see and experience other people doing. So if you're watching if you were watching the Olympics and you watched Michael Phelps, for example, leap off of the starting block into the water, there was some part of your brain that was leaping into the water just like you were Michael Phelps. And what that has allowed human beings to do is to interpret and understand and relate to in a very deep way the experiences of other humans, which of course builds cooperation and teamwork, and it makes bringing down the hairy woolly mammoth a lot easier task, because we can anticipate what other people are going to do, and we can, it's a theory of mind, we can begin to understand how other people think. Well, this works emotionally too. So the mirror neurons were fired when we see somebody else having an emotional experience, and we will become empathically sensitive to their emotional experience. And this is, again, where we can get into this conflict feedback loop, because if Aleya disrespects me, that's going to start triggering off mirror neurons that is going to cause me to feel disrespected. I'm going to interpret it as disrespect. I'm going to react impulsively, and then she's going to interpret my reaction as being disrespectful, and boom, now we're in the conflict feedback loop, and things are just going to escalate. So recognize that there is a biological basis for empathic sensitivity, and the way that you break the loop is to do the Buddha bubble. Just do the Buddha bubble. Just go into a place where you're non-reactive, non-critical, non-judgmental. You're still present with yourself, and you're present for your partner, but you're not allowing yourself to get emotionally reactive to the situation that's around you. And that will help your own mirror neurons stay quiet, so that you will not be creating a conflict feedback loop.
So could you actually walk people through that process? So imagine you're sitting across from somebody who is really, really upset, and they don't even know that you are holding the Buddha bubble, but you are literally in a situation of conflict. This person across from you is having a full-on meltdown. What are you doing inside yourself, Doug?
Well, I would do a lot more than a Buddha bubble, but in terms of doing the Buddha bubble, basically what I'm going to say is, all right, I consciously tell myself, all right,
and this is silent.
Right. Silently to myself as I'm putting myself into a Buddha bubble. I will be non-reactive, non-judgmental, non-critical. I will sit here and be emotionally present for this person and try to understand what is going on, but I'm not going to try to fix, I'm not going to try to explain, I'm not going to try to justify or rationalize. I'm going to simply be present in this emotional moment and allow this wave to pass. And then if I start to feel reactivity, which is normal, I will just recognize the reactivity, take a deep breath and say, I am safe. I'm in the Buddha bubble. Nothing can get me here. There's no reason for me to be to be reactive. And I just keep going through that process until the wave that the other person is experiencing passes. And amazingly enough, if you don't resist, if you don't justify, if you don't yell back, if you maintain that Buddha bubble, that wave will take less than 3 minutes. People just don't have the energy to sustain intense emotion for very long.
The biology is not designed for that.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the secret. And you practice small. Take low-risk situations. When there's some emotionality, maintain the Buddha bubble and see how it works. Figure out, and it's going to fail sometimes, and allow yourself to fail. And pat yourself on the back when you succeed. Because it's like riding a bike, and you're going to fall off the bike a few times before you really get it mastered. And so the Buddha bubble is just something that takes some practice, and you just have to be conscious about it. And it's an amazing, simple little technique that will at least make your life happier, if not dramatically improve your relationships.
So can I actually ask you to share a little bit more of what you were going to say? So I said, well, if you had somebody sitting across from you who was super angry, super upset, what would you do? You would go into the Buddha bubble, and what are the steps there? And you said, well, I would actually do more than the Buddha bubble.
Well, okay, so thanks. What I would be doing is reading the emotional data field of the person who's yelling and screaming and having an emotional experience. What does that mean? I'm going to be looking at them. I'm going to be ignoring their words, something we normally don't do in Western culture. I'm going to completely ignore what they're saying. And I'm going to try to understand what is the emotional experience that this person is having in the moment. And if somebody's really upset, then I know it's going to be a whole complex of emotions. They're going to be layered on top of each other. And so I'm going to start to try to just assess intuitively what those emotions are. And then I'm going to start to affect label. So I'll say, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're feeling hurt, you're feeling betrayed, you feel disrespected, you feel abandoned. You don't, and then depending upon the circumstance and the appropriateness of it, I'll say you're not feeling loved anymore. You feel like you've lost your love, and you feel deep grief and sadness. Notice that all I'm making are short declarative sentences of what I think that person is experiencing. And it doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong.
But you're not saying, I think you are.
No,
you're saying you are feeling.
Correct. There are no I statements in affect labeling.
And are you feeling?
You do not ask questions. It's a declarative statement.
And why not?
Because what we know from the work of Matthew Lieberman, a neuroscientist at UCLA who's studied affect labeling and how it works in the brain, is that when you simply label an emotional experience for somebody, it helps them make sense, cognitively make sense out of something that is very confusing for them. And it actually inhibits the emotional centers of the brain and allows the prefrontal cortex, the more rational part of our brain, to come back online. And by engaging somebody, it causes them, the prefrontal cortex, to compare your statement with the emotional experience that person is going through and judge. Am I angry or not? Oh, now have to assess whether or not I'm angry or not.
Which creates self-awareness.
Which creates self-awareness. And, of course, once you start creating self-awareness, then you can start gaining control over the emotional experience you're having, or at least become more aware of it and start making better choices. So I would be doing a lot of affect labeling to somebody who is really having an emotional experience. And I would probably do that for a minute or two, as long as it took. And then as I saw the emotional experience start to de-escalate, we'd start moving into problem solving.
Good.
So
very helpful.
That's how I do it. Buddha bubble, then affect labeling. Really too simple, really simple techniques, extraordinarily powerful. Extraordinarily powerful.
And actually quite simple. If you realize that you are not responsible for that person's emotions, that person is using those emotions for their own growth and evolution, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you. And
this is most effective when people are personally attacking you. I mean, if somebody's really coming at you and saying, you son of a bitch, who the hell do you think you are? I mean, just really, really being insulting and disrespectful and cussing at you and swearing at you. Being in the Buddha bubble and affect labeling are the two most powerful defenses that you can mount against that. And the beauty of it is, they're not defenses that are going to hurt anybody. They're actually going to help, because you're going to be in a place of non-reactivity. When you are trying to understand the emotional experience that another person is going through, let me tell you something. First of all, your ego gets checked at the door, so your ego's not even involved, and you don't have time to get angry.
Because all of your awareness is on their emotion.
You're totally stepping into their reality. And when you do that, you don't have any room for getting angry yourself. It's an amazing process, and if you start playing with it, you'll see what I mean. It is, I teach this in advanced mediation and peacemaking courses, and people can't believe it, that it works. And then I get these emails after the workshop saying, you will never believe, you won't believe what happened. And they'll tell me the story, and of course it's exactly what we're talking about. And they said this was a miracle, how this changed things.
And if we were to go into the energetics of the Buddha bubble, I would invite you, if you want to call upon this energy, if it resonates for you, is to ask an ascended master, or you from the future as an ascended master, or an archangel, or a being of love and light who has mastery over the vibration of compassion, or Buddha, to come and stand next to you and model in their own energy fields how they move into a frequency of compassion for an individual who is hurting. Anytime somebody is reactive or upset, it's the indication that there is high levels of inner hurt going on, and there's a ton of projection. And so this is actually an opportunity for you to start practicing mastering compassion for yourself and for the other individual. And you can call upon these beings of love and light that do surround us in these other dimensions to model the energy to us and to hold a safe and sacred space. Now, obviously, if you're in a situation where there's physical harm, you're going to want to drop all of this and get out of the situation until you're in a place of physical safety. And that actually brings in the piece around safety. There's a huge issue around partners telling the truth with each other. And we only tell the truth when we feel safe. It's not my responsibility to make sure that Doug is safe. It's not his responsibility to make sure that I am safe. It's my responsibility to make sure that I feel safe inside myself. And it's his responsibility to make sure he is safe inside himself. So if you're in relationship, even if you're in a friendship, it's actually your responsibility to find that safety deep in your core. And it is their responsibility to make sure that they feel safe inside themselves if they so choose. But if you feel safe inside yourself, you are actually going to create an energetic space of safety for another person. It's called the law of resonance. And when we are exposed to a higher vibration, we naturally move into that higher frequency. So if you're feeling safe inside yourself, breathing into that divine line, that inner river of light that flows on the front of the spine, I speak about that all of the time in my daily meditations, and you start finding that safety there, you will start creating this energetic field of safety in your intimate relationships. Instead of asking your partner what they did last night, or who they were talking to on the phone, or how they're even feeling, as you just simply hold a safe space inside yourself, your partner will actually start revealing more and more to you, especially when you ask them a question without probing or without the distrust. So safety is a key component of you building safety inside yourself, and then asking for that energetic safety to be held in the relationship. And then the truth starts truly being revealed.
So I think we've pounded this one down pretty hard.
The safety one?
Safety and emotions and Buddha bubble.
And what about needs?
That's where I was going to go next.
Go for it.
All right. So here's one of the challenges that we have. Excuse me.
Doug's getting over his cough.
Right. Here's the problem that we have in intimate relationships. It's all good and well, you say, Doug and Aleya, for me to be in a Buddha bubble and be compassionate and loving and non-reactive to my partner, but I never get any of my own needs met. When am I going to get loved? When am I going to be soothed? When am I going to get taken care of? Who's looking out for my interests? And it doesn't wash for you guys to tell me that I need to take care of my own stuff.
And there's a huge amount of irritation and frustration and anger that gets built up when our needs don't get addressed.
All right, so let's unpack that a little bit, because unfortunately, when we have these kinds of feelings, we are getting trapped by our culture. So we live in this Western culture, and we are in many ways still influenced by the Victorian era, which was a time that lasted approximately 80 years when Queen Victoria of England was ruler supreme of the world from about 1860 to the 1940s. And the Victorian era was famous for a lot of things, many of them good, many of them awful. But one of the social mores that developed and evolved during the Victorian era was this idea that we all had to be selfless. That we always had to, especially women had to look out for the family and look out for the man, and her own interests were not important. And it was this whole idea that if you asked for your own needs to be met, that somehow you were a selfish, unworthy, sinful, immoral human being. And this kind of this has gotten reiterated by Scripture, misinterpretation of Scripture, and people who are basically saying if you're looking out for your own needs, you're just a bad person. Selfish. Narcissistic. All the labels.
And if you ask for your needs, high maintenance.
So what happens is then, of course this denies our essential biology that we have these needs. We have the need to be loved. We have the need to be soothed. We have the need to be
listened to.
To be listened to and to have empathy with other human beings. We have the need to be attached and bonded to intimate partners. These are fundamental needs that we have, and to deny those needs is to deny our essential humanity. So what happens now, we move into the 21st century and we start forming intimate relationships, and none of this stuff really gets talked about. So, and these cultural norms still persist out there. They haven't gone away. They're still out there. Many of you might even recall growing up where your mommy told you, you can't be selfish. You have to put other people's needs in front of yourself. Well, unfortunately, that lesson was not the whole lesson, because mommy didn't tell you about how to meet your own needs. So you get into a relationship and you fall in love and you think, okay, this is really terrific. Now for the first time, my needs are going to get met. I'm with my perfect partner. This person is going to be able to read my thoughts, read my emotions, and anticipate every need that I have, and I'm going to feel whole and full and loved for the first time in my life as an adult. And of course, what happens? It ain't going to happen. And so we go through life in these intimate relationships, and as unmet need, which have never been stated, they are assumptions and expectations that we hold individually that we've never communicated to our partner. But as they are betrayed and violated and not met over and over again, we get hurt and hurt and hurt and hurt, and the emotional distance starts to develop between the partners.
And then we get really frustrated because we think that person should know what our needs are and how to meet our needs.
And what a crummy human being that person is for not meeting my needs. How selfish is he or she? Never meets my needs, never is there for me, totally emotionally unavailable. You've heard all the words. And so
felt all the feelings.
Right. And so that's what breaks down emotional intimacy. All right, so the cure is honesty. Recognizing that we have these social mores and social norms that make it uncomfortable for us to talk about what our needs really are, and that we feel vulnerable when we talk about our needs. What happens if I talk about my needs and my partner laughs at me or rejects them or says, I'm not going to meet your needs until you meet mine? Well, we'll get to that, because now we're getting into a negotiation, which is where you want to be. You want to negotiate this.
But we also take our needs so personally that if our needs don't get met, that we are somehow not a worthy partner, or right, they're going to abandon us. Well, we put so much on our needs.
We feel guilty ourselves and start blaming the other person. And so what happens, of course, is we get back into that conflict feedback loop that I talked about a little while ago, and it makes intimacy very, very, very difficult to achieve. So part of the Buddha bubble, affect labeling, being emotionally present in your own stuff, the flip side of that is recognizing what your needs are, and having a way to communicate your needs in a non-threatening, compassionate, loving way to your partner to see if that partner is willing to meet your needs. So you want to talk about that?
I do. When just take a moment right now and think about a need that you have from your partner, that you want your partner to provide something for you. Maybe you want your partner to listen to you, to actually care, to respect you. Whatever it is, to honor you. And as you take that moment to get clear on what that emotion is, I invite you to start meeting that need internally in your own self. I use the higher self, our energy self, to begin to activate the vibration of that need in a higher vibrational realm, and then begin reflecting that need down to you here in this physical realm, so that you internally and vertically in this inner river of light, you are feeling this need being met. You are starting to respect yourself more deeply, to listen to yourself more deeply. And as you start to feel, perceive, invite, and imagine that inner need being met vertically and internally, you then have the capacity to have your partner meet that need. If you have a need that you are not fulfilling inside yourself, no matter how much your partner fulfills it for you, you will not perceive that need being met. So if I never listen to myself, if I'm never listening to my inner voice, my inner wisdom, I will constantly be saying to Doug, Doug, you never listen to me. Even if he's listening to me 24/7. As soon as I start meeting that need, I then start perceiving and creating situations where he is reflecting back to me my own internal reality. So if your partner isn't listening to you or isn't respecting you, this is the big hard part that's really tough to swallow. Where are you not respecting yourself? Where are you not committing to yourself? Where are you not being available to yourself? Where are you not listening to yourself? And start doing your own inner work. And then as you start feeling that need being met internally, you will then create a situation where your partner is reflecting it back to you. And I remember in the very beginning of our relationship, for the first 2 years of our relationship, Doug was in a messy situation. He was getting divorced, and he was not emotionally available for me. Now, fortunately, I had the ability to see into the future, to see that 3 years from now, 4 years from now, he would be able to be emotionally available, but he wasn't able to be emotionally available for the first 2 years of our relationship. So every single time I wanted something from him, I would then start meeting that need internally. And I remember one night standing, washing dishes, and I thought, he doesn't appreciate me. Okay, well, where could I appreciate myself? And so I started streaming internally and vertically a vibration of appreciation of self. And within 2 minutes, he came over to me and he hugged me and he said, I appreciate you. And I said not a word. I just looked at him and said, thank you for reflecting back to me my own internal reality. So I invite you to start practicing this very simple technique. And the frustration, the anger, the irritation of your partner not meeting your needs actually goes away when you start carrying responsibility for meeting your needs and then creating the reality where the partner does reflect that back to you.
So like in all other aspects of developing new skills in intimate relationships, this takes practice, and you don't want to go out and do the big wave on the first try. So take very, very small steps. Ask for very small things to see what the reaction is. Recognize, too, that, again, it's riding a bike. There are going to be times when you fall off the bike, or your partner's going to fall off the bike. Just start with really small, safe stuff, and build confidence, build practice, and see how it goes. So it's really learning in action, taking your relationship as a lab and finding out whether or not, if you express a small, simple need, whether or not it can be met. And I would recommend that you request a need that you know your partner is going to be happy to respond to. Ooh.
I'll talk now.
I need some water, love.
You meet that need there, Doug. A lot of the times when we ask for a need and our partner can't meet that need, we will then feel rejected. But if you are rejecting yourself, you will then perceive rejection. So if I am not rejecting myself internally, and I say to Doug, Doug, could you hug me right now? And he says, no, I will then hug myself and meet my own need. If I ask Doug to hug me and he is not internally hugging himself, it's going to be very difficult for him to meet that need of mine. If I'm asking Doug to love me to a certain degree and he doesn't love himself to that same degree, he cannot love me to that same degree. So I invite you to start asking yourself, what is your partner doing for themselves that they would have the capacity to do for you? Where are you doing these things for yourself that you then have the capacity to do for your partner? Not from a place of obligation or resentment or responsibility, but more from the place of just the pure joy of sharing. And I'm going to bring in an energetic protocol. I haven't spoken too many energetic protocols tonight because this is really more about sharing very practical tools with the awareness of what's going on energetically. But the energetic protocol is to invite you at the level of your higher self, your body Davis higher self, and your team to work with your energetic fields and the guides to energetically locate all responsibilities for all of your needs that you have given to your partner. Take a moment and let that energy self locate all of those needs you have given to your partner, respecting you, honoring you, committing to you, loving you, listening to you, caring about you, supporting you, and lift all of that responsibility off your partner and bring that responsibility back to you at the level of your higher self, your body's higher self, your team. And as you hold that responsibility for meeting your own needs, your partner is then free to do whatever they need to do as you meet your own needs, and then you create the situation of the reflection. Good. Do you have anything to add?
I don't.
Okay.
Should we take questions?
Yes. Now I'm wondering if there's anybody on the phone that has the capacity to share questions, or if there's anybody on the internet that has the capacity to share questions. This is our new format, so I apologize if there were any glitches in the system. There might have been. But if you have any questions, any challenges that come up for you, please share those over the phone. I think you should be unmuted. And I don't know if we're going to get questions, but we'll see. You can also email them in. We're checking that as well. Okay. Anybody on the phone?
No, I hear nothing. All callers are muted and they can unmute themselves. Oh.
Okay. Can you think of any other situations that would get triggered for people?
You know, this covers such a broad array of situations and relationships. You know, we're talking about how to have an intimate relationship, and so many people start from a negative. I've been blessed to be married to Aleya, which is an amazing experience for me, and we've been quite fortunate to be able to practice these things and develop these skills. And it comes with practice. It doesn't come just naturally. This is stuff that I've worked out through my work as a mediator and peacemaker, and it's obviously stuff that Aleya's worked out.
We've got a question.
All right, I've got to put my glasses on if you want me to read it.
If you are in a relationship doing all this, at what point do you decide, no, I need to move on and dissolve the relationship and any energetic help in making that not such a nightmare? So,
Great question.
Go for it.
Okay. So, you want to... my answer here is based on the work of David Snarch. And if you are not aware of him, he is a marriage counselor. I believe he's an MD, and he's based out of Colorado. He's written his most famous book is called The Passionate Marriage, and he talks about a two-choice dilemma. And basically what happens in a two-choice dilemma is when you are centered in yourself and you are emotionally aware and you are in a place where you are really progressing in terms of your ability to be happy and to take care of yourself in the way that we've described, then you tell your partner, I wish you to be in the same place that I am. And your partner, and you don't threaten, you just say, I wish you to be in this place because this is the place of happiness. And basically what you're giving your partner is a choice. The partner can either grow or not grow. If the partner decides to not grow, your relationship is over with, and it's time to move on. Because now you have outgrown, emotionally, you have outgrown the relationship, and it's time to move on. If your
the partner doesn't want to move forward.
Yeah, that's assuming your partner doesn't want to move forward. Your partner's stuck. All right, well, then it's time to move on. If your partner, however, wants to move forward but doesn't know how, that's a good thing. Then you don't leave the relationship. You start figuring out how can we bring in tools together to help us work through this stuff. So you don't want to do anything until you yourself are in a place where you emotionally matured. And only after you have emotionally matured to a level that you can give your partner a two-choice dilemma do you do that. Reason why? You're in a marriage or a relationship to learn lessons for yourself. If you leave that relationship prematurely before you've learned those lessons, you're going to go into your next relationship and you're going to start all over again. And all the pain and suffering that you had in your first relationship is going to recapitulate in the second one. So learn as many lessons as you can, grow as much as you can, confront your partner with a two-choice dilemma, and then, depending upon what the choice is, you'll know your answer. You either gracefully move on, or you stay and work it out. And either way, it's good for you because you know that if you have to leave the relationship, you have emotionally grown so much that the next partner you call in will be one who will be perfect for you.
And I have something that was excellent, and it's a great book, Passionate Marriage by David Schnark. I recommend everybody to read it. And there's another component that I will actually use when I'm working with people who are in a situation they don't know whether or not they should stay in the relationship. This is a very powerful prayer statement request. And it goes like this. If this relationship supports my greatest happiness, let it be so. If it does not, let it fall away. Usually within 24 to 48 hours, it is a very clear indicator about whether or not the relationship is meant to be or if it's meant to fall away. Sometimes everything can come up and be revealed, and honesty and truth and your actual realization of, oh my God, I really love this person and I'm willing to do whatever it takes, comes up to the surface after you've made that statement. So I invite you to wait until you're very, very clear that you want clarity from the higher realms, from your higher self, maybe you from the future, of if this relationship supports my greatest happiness, let it be so. If it does not, let it fall away.
Most importantly, recognize that you're in a relationship to learn and to emotionally grow. And most people come into a relationship emotionally immature. Immature. That's the way we come into a relationship, emotionally immature. And the whole point of marriage or intimate relationship is to force us to grow spiritually and emotionally. That's the purpose of it. And so don't abandon that purpose if you have not gotten everything that you can get out of learning the lessons of how to be intimate with another person.
And the other component to that is to release your partner from being responsible for teaching you particular lessons. So there's a question in the chat room about that. And I actually recommend people to release all of their ex-partners from teaching them how to master compassion, respect, integrity, boundaries, empowerment, whatever it is. So a lot of the times we'll give our partner or our ex-partners responsibility for teaching us a lesson, and we actually want to release them from that responsibility and hold that responsibility in our own selves. And then we gain greater clarity as we carry that responsibility for ourselves. There's another question in the chat room that I'm going to just say out loud. This can be used with any relationships. Yes, you can use any of these tools in any of the relationships that you have with your children, your parents, your friends, colleagues. If so, what if you are dealing with an ex-partner who you have to communicate with because you have a child and he refuses to communicate properly?
Okay, that's always tough. Well, there's a reason why the partner's an ex-partner. And obviously that partner is feeling a lot of anger, frustration, hurt, betrayal, injustice. And you're probably thinking, yeah, but I feel all those things too. Well, yeah, you do. And so does this person. And this person is impulsively reactive to the emotional experiences that come up whenever you are talking to them, because you're probably a trigger. And the child is probably a trigger. Well, just start practicing what we've been talking about. First of all, put yourself in a Buddha bubble. Be aware of your own emotional reactions so that when you are in the presence of this ex-partner and that person is yelling at you or cussing you out or being disrespectful
or not communicating with you,
that you are non-reactive, non-judgmental, non-critical, but you're not insulated and you're not emotionally shut down. You're just in a place of complete openness, but you're protected by the Buddha bubble. Start there and let that just be in that place for a couple of 3 or 4 weeks and see what shifts. And you will probably, if you're becoming non-reactive, you'll probably start to see some interesting changes in behavior, because the person will learn that he or she can't push against you anymore to get a reaction. Very powerful tool. You might even try affect labeling down the road. I can tell well, I wouldn't say I can tell. You're angry right now. You're frustrated. And just because this person has never heard these words from you before, you're just going to do it very quick. 2 seconds. You're angry. Stop. Pause. Be silent. You're frustrated. Darn right I'm frustrated. Yada, 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 yada. And you're really angry. Yeah, I'm really angry. And that's all you have to say. It's just feed back the emotion in a declarative statement. 1, 2 words. You are whatever it is. And see what happens.
The other component that I'm looking at around this question is if we have somebody that we have to communicate with that we have chosen not to be in an intimate relationship with, i.e. your ex, what I actually see at an energetic level is to release all attachment for that person's behavior. So if they need to be disrespectful, if they need to be arrogant, if they need to be unconscious of their behavior, if they need to be shut down, you are actually holding this incredibly safe and loving space and almost an accepting space for them to be in whatever behavior they need to be in. Whenever we get emotionally triggered, upset, charged, or frustrated because of another person's behavior, that is an indicator that you are actually attached to their behavior, to them somehow changing or waking up. So you want to send all attachment, or rather lift all attachment for their behavior off of them and only be attached to your own behavior, not theirs at all. And when you are completely and totally unattached and not responsible for their behavior, for waking them up, for changing them, for moving them into a more evolved way of being, your emotions will be the indicator that you are now in a place of complete and total neutrality and energetic integrity. You're not going to get triggered, you're not going to get upset if you are not attached and not responsible for another person's behavior. The moment I start to get upset because of Doug's behavior, I have just placed attachment for his behavior on him. That's not my job. I only want to be attached to my own journey, to my own behavior.
You're also giving away your power. Every time you attach or get upset at somebody else's behavior, you're giving up your power and you're empowering them. So if you really want to talk about self-empowerment, don't give up your power. Don't give up your emotional power. Become this non-reactive, non-judgmental, non-critical. Be in the Buddha bubble. That will be one of the most powerful statements you can make, and you will hold your power within you and completely disempower the person who's being so rude and disrespectful to you. It's amazing.
I wouldn't say you disempower them. You actually just help them feel where they really are. Which
I would say you are disempowering them and causing them to move onto a path of enlightenment. And you're disempowering that part of them that is being so negative.
Oh, and then they'll stop being in that
Exactly.
behavior, that reaction.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Another question just popped up.
Okay, so it's more of a comment. That's very helpful, but I'm more frustrated than angry because it involves the safety of my son sometimes.
You know, that's a tough one. If you really feel like your child is not safe, we all know that the courts really want to see joint custody between the parents, that every parent has a right to be a parent and every child has a right to be with a parent. You're going to have pretty hard evidence that your child is endangered before you're going to get a court to change a visitation order or a custody order. Oftentimes, and I'm speaking as a lawyer, oftentimes the situation comes up where people think that their children are in danger when in fact they probably really aren't. So you're just going to have to ask yourself, is this something really serious? And if it is, you're going to have to be able to document it objectively to convince a judge that there is a danger here. Otherwise, it's going to be he said, she said, and there's not much you can do about that. Very difficult, challenging situation.
I do have an energetic solution for that. And your child, no matter how old or young your child is, as a soul in their own inner being, they are actually responsible for their own safety. That's not even your responsibility. And I know that that's a little bit of heresy. So as you, as a parent, return responsibility for the child's safety back to the child at the level of the child's higher self, where it has the capacity to hold that responsibility for its safety, the child then will start magnetically drawing and creating situations for itself that reflect to it its own inner safety. So again, if you're concerned about your child's safety and you are in a situation where you cannot be creating an environment for that, i.e. the visitation of your child going to your ex, silently invite your higher self to send all responsibility for your child's safety back to your child at the level of their higher self. Send all relevant and appropriate energetic information to your child about how they can create safe situations for themselves no matter where they are.
Here's another possibility, and that is, again, it depends on the age of your child, because it's got to be age appropriate, but isn't this a perfect opportunity to teach your child how to speak for his or her needs? And if your child is feeling unsafe in the presence of the other parent, can you coach your child how to ask for her needs to be met so that she feels safe? And how would you go about teaching her to be mindful of her needs, to be able to ask for them in a respectful way, and to create the situation where her needs are going to be met because she's asking for them.
His needs,
yeah, that's right, for the son. So look at it as a teaching moment as well, and that could be very useful for the child too. As the boy learns how to ask for his needs to be met.
Good.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Any other questions? We filled you up a lot. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, this is a 3-unit graduate course in about an hour. Oh, we got a whole bunch of stuff coming up.
What if you have to deal with a parent that is delusional and speaking in circles and refusing to deal with practical reality?
Okay.
Shall I go into my energetic component?
Sure. Sorry, sure.
It's okay. Why don't you drink a little
Yeah,
water?
go ahead. We're almost out. Go ahead.
On that one, with a parent who is entrenched in their reality and is refusing help, the Buddha bubble is going to come in very handy. And the other component is realizing that that parent has made many, many decisions that has put them into the situation that they're in now. If you are the, where you're taking care of the parent?
You're a conservator. Mm-hmm.
So if you're in charge of their health, what you can do is you can create a situation where they are physically safe, where they are physically supported. that's the main component that could be dealt with in the physical realm. But at an energetic level, I invite you to hold space for your parent to be in the state that they are in, with incredible compassion, but not taking responsibility for their emotional choices.
Yeah, I'm dealing with parents who, and now again, you have to distinguish between, is this a parent who's always acted this way, or are we seeing the onset of some
dementia
or Alzheimer's, something like that? You know, those are really hard for lay people like us to diagnose and to deal with. If your parent has always been kind of loopy and is getting loopier with old age, that's one thing. But if now the parent is really starting to lose touch with reality, obviously you need to get them evaluated to find out where they're at. But you know, a lot of parents, as they get older, you know, they get into their 80s and 90s, they're angry because life is now about to end, and you know, they're feeling their mortality, and so a lot of what you're going to be looking at is anger and frustration and maybe even fear around the end of life. And again, being in the Buddha bubble, holding that compassion, being able to affect label, are all tools that might work to mitigate the situation.
Good. Any other questions from anybody? Oh, she's always acted that way, but it's getting worse. I would hold a safe and loving space for her to be in her circle.
Yep, it doesn't sound to me like she's probably having onsets of a mental decline. She's just old and feisty.
And again, the less attached you are to another person's behavior, the more neutral you will be in your own emotions. Any little ounce of frustration or irritation that you have towards another person's behavior is the indicator that you're attached to it or taking responsibility for it, attached to changing it. Release that attachment and the neutrality comes in a heartbeat.
A couple other things. Don't try to fix her. Don't try to solve her problems, and be sure to state your needs. So, for example, if your mother is going off and is all of a sudden becoming demanding on you because you've got to go do something, you need to make your needs to her known. Say, I will you honor my needs in doing this? And quite frankly, if you have that honest conversation with her about your needs having to be met, it's kind of amazing how people will shift once they understand what's really going on. And if you have the conversation in the right way, you might even have a deeper conversation and find out why it is that she acts the way that she does, which is probably a feeling of loss, abandonment, lack of love, fear, usual stuff that drives these kinds of behaviors. So you can check that out too. It's amazing what happens when we start to listen to people.
And ask them questions.
And start asking some questions. Then start asking for our needs to be met.
Well, and just say to her, it sounds like you're really frustrated right now.
You're really frustrated right now. I need to go to the bank. Can we talk about this later? I need to go out on my date, or I need to go whatever I'm going to do. Can we talk about this later?
Or I need to have a time with you that feels good. Like, right. What do you want from that person?
I'd love to have a morning with you where we're just happy with each other.
As opposed to, I want to have a morning with you where you're not complaining. That's a negative.
Yeah. So anyways, those are all ideas about how to use these tools in those kinds of difficult situations.
Good. Any other questions from anybody over the phone or in the chat room?
Deafening silence.
Either full or asleep. What are the two?
I don't know. But there's a comment that just popped up?
Nope. Just, yes, that was awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. My sense is to complete.
All right.
We are in deep gratitude for you all joining us tonight and sharing your bits of information with us and holding a space for us to share these tools with you. We are in deep gratitude. We thank the angelic realm. We thank you for the level of courage that you carry inside yourself to look for different ways of being. Let it be so. Aho. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Namaste.